Any reproduction of this training video, in part or in whole, is unlawful and strictly prohibited without the prior written consent of ViaGrafix Corporation. Included with your videotape is a course index. This contains reference numbers which will allow you to quickly access sections and topics with ease. In order to use this, you should reset the counter on your VCR to 0 now.
The Teach Yourself series from ViaGrafix, designed to teach you to use your computer the fast and easy way.
I'm Bruce Wood, along with Paula Kennedy.
One of the reasons why Excel is so popular is because of its range of uses for people in all different walks of life.
Excel can be used for something as simple as an address book, or for more complex tasks like payroll or inventory. After learning the material in this tutorial, you will be able to confidently work with a workbook.
You'll be able to create a workbook and enter various types of data into it. In addition, you'll be able to format the workbook, perform simple calculations, spell check the workbook, print, save it, and perform many other features. Throughout this tutorial, you'll see us refer to pre-constructed sample files called the learning files. To help you learn the material more easily, we suggest you download these files and use them for practice as you follow along with the exercises.
Keep in mind that these learning files can only be used within the application.
If you would like to try these exercises with us, please download the learning files now using the following instructions.
The learning files can be downloaded from the ViaGrafix website at www.viagrafix.com/files/e/excel_98. We suggest saving these files to the desktop for easy access.
Let's begin this venture by addressing the components of the Excel 98 window. Once we know the names for each part, we'll be able to work around the window much faster.
Let's begin by opening Excel. To access the program window, we'll double-click the Macintosh hard drive. From this window, we see a shortcut icon including Microsoft Office 98. We double-click this icon and see the Microsoft Office 98 window. To start Excel, we simply double-click the Microsoft Excel icon. The splash screen, then a blank workbook, appears on the screen. To identify the components of the Excel window, we will start from the top where we see the menu bar. At the very left is the Apple menu, followed by other menus to access commands. We can open any of the menus by clicking on the one we'd like to open. For example, we'll open the File menu. With this menu open, we see several commands below. Menus are the structure that organizes the commands we'll use to perform various tasks. For now, let's close this menu by clicking the menu bar. Below the menu bar are two toolbars. The first toolbar is the standard toolbar. The second is the formatting toolbar. Each toolbar contains tools we can click to quickly select a command. So while we use Excel, it's our option to select a command through the menu or a toolbar because almost any command can be accessed from a toolbar. Notice that as we pass our pointer over these tools, a tool tip for the tool is displayed. These tool tips show the tool's function. As we discuss the toolbars, it's important to understand that these two toolbars are merely the default toolbars to be viewed. There are several that aren't shown right now. To display a toolbar, we open the View menu, then select the Toolbars command. From the Toolbars flyout, we see a long list of toolbars that can be displayed. Standard and Formatting have check marks beside them because they are currently displayed. To display another one, for example the Chart toolbar, we simply click it. Notice the Chart toolbar appears near the bottom of the window. To hide a toolbar, we open the View menu, select Toolbars, then click the selected toolbar we want to deselect. We'll click Chart to take it from the window. Below the toolbars is the formula bar. The formula bar shows what cell is selected, which is A1 right now. It also displays the contents of the active cell and allows us to edit cell content. Below the formula bar is the title bar for our workbook. This title bar displays the name of the open workbook. Because we are looking at an unedited and unsaved workbook, we see Workbook 1 on the title bar. The title bar is followed by the worksheet. Along the top of the worksheet are column header letters, and beside the left side of the sheet are the row header numbers. Inside the worksheet we see several sections which are identified as cells. On the right side of our work area is the vertical scroll bar. We use it to scroll through our document when there is too much content to see it all in one window. The horizontal scroll bar at the bottom of the window lets us scroll from side to side if the entire document is too wide to be viewed at one time. Each scroll bar has buttons and a scroll box, which make it easy for us to move through a long or wide document with ease. Use the scroll box for faster scrolling. While looking at the horizontal scroll bar, we notice there are 4 buttons on the left side. These buttons are the tab scrolling buttons. To understand how they work, let's look at the 3 sheet tabs with Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and Sheet 3. These represent the individual sheets of cells in our workbook. We have 3 sheets right now, but we could remove sheets or add many more. When we have so many sheets that we can't see all the tabs, we use the sheet scrolling buttons to display more sheets. The last component we'll mention is the status bar at the very bottom. The status bar displays what's going on in our document. Right now it shows Ready.
Now that we have addressed the parts of the Excel window, let's discuss what a workbook really is. Excel creates files called workbooks. As you probably already know, Excel is a powerful tool. Part of its strength is based on the fact that each workbook holds individual worksheets which each contain individual cells.
A workbook is the electronic equivalent of a 3-ring binder, with the exception that within this 3-ring binder we find spreadsheets. Each spreadsheet is like a separate piece of paper inside of the workbook. While looking at the Excel workbook, we see there are 3 worksheets. Each worksheet can hold different information. To access the information in a worksheet, we simply click the Sheet tab at the bottom of the window for that sheet. When a worksheet is active, the title of the Sheet tab appears bold-faced. To move to another worksheet, we simply click the tab. Let's continue this discussion with the divisions in our worksheet. We see vertical columns and horizontal rows. Total, there are 256 columns labeled A through IV. Row headings appear as numbers from 1 to 65,536 down the left side of the worksheet. The next division in this worksheet is a cell. A cell is the intersection of a column and a row. There are a total of 16,777,216 cells in each worksheet. With so many cells, it would be hard to distinguish each one as a single entity if we didn't have a special way to name them. Fortunately, we have such a method. Each cell has a specific address referenced by the intersecting column and row headings. The first cell has the reference A1 because it rests in column A and row 1. Entering information into cells is simple. All we have to do is select the cell we wish to store data within, then type the data. Of course, the kind of data that a cell stores can get complicated, but for these exercises we'll be keeping the data at an introductory level. In order to enter data into a cell, we need to first select the cell. This is most easily done by clicking in the cell. Let's click in cell A4. Although we know this cell is selected because we just clicked here, we have a better indicator. We can distinguish that a single cell has been selected when a black border appears around it. Because there's a black border around A4, we can see that it's selected. Now that we've selected the cell we want to enter data into, let's get to the matter at hand, entering data. To enter simple data into a cell, such as a number or text, all we have to do is type it. Let's type average production rates of video editors. Now to officially enter this into the cell, we need to press return or select another cell. Let's press return. This confirms the data for this cell, then selects the next cell down. Let's get some practice entering data into cells and selecting other cells. In cell A5, we'll type Bill, then press the right arrow key to select cell B5. Here we'll type Richard. Continuing to press the right arrow key to select the next cell to the right, as well as accepting this data, we'll type Kate in cell C5. In cell D5, Sam, and in cell E5, we'll type Jason. This gives us some practice as to how we enter text into cells. Entering numbers works the same way. Let's select cell A6 by clicking it, then enter the number 3 by simply typing it. Now we'll press the right arrow key to select cell B6 and type 2. In cell C6 we'll enter 3, in D6 2, and in E6 4. At this point we can give ourselves a pat on the back because we're on our way to mastering Excel. Knowing how to enter typical data like text or numbers is a huge portion of normal spreadsheet activity.
You may pause the tape now.
Let's review what we covered in this chapter. We identified the components of the Excel window, then learned how to insert information into a cell.
Up to this point, we know how to select an individual cell, and we understand that it's important to select a cell in order to make changes to it. But the concept is much bigger than just this.
It's important to know how to select cells because, as with any program we use, the area that is selected is the area to which the command will be directed. For example, if we have a group of cells selected, then click the bold tool, then all the information currently in those cells is bolded. This even includes information that we type there later.
In the next exercise, we'll learn how to select groups of cells. Keep in mind, we call a selection of 2 or more adjacent cells the range. Understanding this is vital to performing the exercises planned for this tutorial.
Now for our selecting adventures. One of the most popular ways to select a cell is to drag the mouse over an area. For instance, we want to select cells A5 to cells E5. So we place the pointer over A5, then drag to E5. All the cells are selected now. While we have these selected, let's try one of the formatting tools to prove that all the selected cells are affected by a single execution of a command. At the right end of the formatting toolbar is the font color tool, so let's click its drop down, then select blue. After making a change to a selection, it's often hard to see the change while the area is still selected. Deselecting is as easy as clicking the mouse or by pressing one of the arrow keys on the keyboard. We click and the area is deselected. Supposing that we need to select parts of multiple rows or columns, this task is also simple. Let's select from cell A4 to E6. To do this, we drag from one of the corners. Let's take it from A4 and drag to E6. Regardless of which corner we start from, we can select blocks of cells by dragging over them. Also try selecting by holding down the Shift key and pressing the arrow keys. With this area still selected, let's make a change to the selection to prove that even larger sections can be affected by the execution of a single command. For this block of cells, let's use the formatting toolbar to increase the size of the text. We call this increasing the point size of the font. The second tool from the left of the formatting toolbar is the font size tool. Notice that we're currently using size 9. Let's change this to size 14 by clicking the drop-down button for font size and selecting 14. This increases the size a tad. To see this better, we'll deselect the section by pressing the left arrow key. This brings us to the topic of selecting very large areas on the worksheet, such as rows or columns. If we wanted, we could drag over an entire row or column to select it, but this would certainly be cumbersome. The better way to select a row or column is to click its heading, which is the gray cell with a letter for the column or a number for the row. For instance, by clicking the cell heading for column B, that's the gray cell with the letter B, we can quickly select the entire column. And by the same token, we can select the entire 9th row by clicking its heading, the gray cell with the number 9. But let's not stop at selecting single rows or columns, because we can select as many as we want. First, let's try this by dragging. To select rows 2, 3, and 4, we can place our pointer over the row heading 2, then drag to the row heading 4. This selects all the rows. The same goes for columns. To select columns D, E, and F, we can place the pointer over the D heading, then drag to the F heading. This selects all these columns. Selecting adjacent rows or columns like we've just done is great, but what if we wanted to select rows and columns not touching one another? Well, we can. In addition to having columns D, E, and F selected, let's also select column A. To do this, we hold down the Command key, then click column A's heading cell. This method of selecting is also useful in rows or individual cells that do not touch one another. For example, let's say that in addition to having columns A, D, E, and F selected, we also want to select row 2 and cell C3. We can do this by holding down the Command key, then clicking the row heading 2, then while still holding down the Command key, also clicking cell C3. To reflect this odd selection, let's make a change to this area by executing a single command. We'll apply shading to these cells. On the formatting toolbar, located second from the right, is the Fill Color tool. Let's click its drop-down arrow, then select a fill color such as tan. To see this better, click the worksheet to deselect the areas. Notice that all the columns, row 9 and cell C3 are tan.
Well, we've just seen how useful the Command key is when selecting large blocks of cells. The Shift key is equally as useful.
The only difference is in how they select. The Command key is useful for selecting groups of cells that don't have to be touching. The Shift key is limited to selecting areas adjacent to one another. We want to select from cell A1 to H15. We can quickly do this by clicking one corner of the area we wish to select, for example in cell A1. Now, hold down the Shift key and click the diagonal corner H15. Everything in the middle is selected. But let's say that we meant to select an extra row down. We can easily add to the selected area by holding down the Shift key again, then pressing the down arrow key. Notice part of row 16 is now included. Now that we understand how using Shift works, let's deselect the area by clicking.
There's just one more task we want to perform in our selecting of lessons, and that is to select the entire worksheet.
We can select an entire worksheet by clicking the Select All button. It's the gray button in the left corner of the worksheet adjacent to heading A and heading 1. We click it and all the cells in the worksheet are selected. While we have everything selected, let's make this worksheet all white. We'll click the drop down for the Fill tool, second from the right on the formatting toolbar, and select the No Fill button. This returns the color of our worksheet to normal. In the next exercise, we'll put the skills we've learned together so we can format the worksheet we're creating. We'll also learn how to add or remove cells. There are 3 blank rows at the top of our worksheet that we don't need. We want to remove them. To do this, we'll first need to select rows 1, 2, and 3. We do this by dragging from heading 1 to heading 3. Now we'll delete them by opening the Edit menu and selecting the Delete command. The rows are now deleted, and we'll deselect the area by clicking. Keep in mind that we delete columns using similar steps. Tips for removing rows or columns. When we delete a column, all remaining columns will shift to the left. When we delete a row, all remaining rows will shift up. While we're here, let's try deleting specific cells. Just for practice, let's delete cells B2 and C2. We drag over these cells to select them, then open the Edit menu and choose Delete. This brings open the Delete dialog box because deleting cells that belong among other cells affects several other positions. Notice we can shift the remaining cells to the left, up, or we can remove the entire row or column. We'll keep Shift Cells Up selected and click OK. Notice that the editor's names are now removed and the numbers appear in their place. We just wanted to demonstrate what happens when we delete individual cells, but we don't really want to make this change to our worksheet, so let's undo this action by opening the Edit menu and selecting Undo. The deletion is undone. Looking at our worksheet, we have the average production rates of video editors, the editors' names, and one set of rates. We'd like to specify the time period for each rate. This can be done by displaying the month in column A and scooting over the other information. What we want to do is insert a column. Because we want the empty column to appear in column A, we will click on the column heading A to select this column. Now open the Insert menu and select the Columns command. A new column is added on the left side. Let's deselect by clicking. Keep in mind that we follow similar steps to insert a row. Now let's try inserting individual cells. We want to insert cells from B2 to F2 so there is an empty cell between our title and the editor's names. Let's begin by dragging from B2 to F2 to select our range. Now open the Insert menu and select Cells. This opens the Insert dialog box where there are options to shift the existing cells right, shift them down, or to insert an entire row or column. We'll keep Down selected and click OK. This inserts empty cells between the title and the editor's names.
Other very important fundamental tasks include adding or removing sheets from a workbook.
Adding a sheet is useful anytime that we want a workbook to hold changing data. For example, we may want to use a workbook to hold payroll. Each sheet could be a month's payroll, meaning that we'd need 12 sheets.
On the other hand, removing sheets is useful when we no longer need the data on a sheet or when we need less than 3 sheets in the workbook. In cases like these, removing sheets serves to tidy up the workbook.
Let's start by adding a sheet. Keep in mind that the added sheet will appear in front of the selected sheet. Therefore, our fourth sheet will appear in front of sheet 1 since sheet 1 is selected. To add the sheet, open the Insert menu and select Worksheet. Notice that sheet 4 does appear before sheet 1. Now let's remove a sheet. For this demonstration, we'll remove sheet 2. We begin by selecting the sheet we want to remove, which is sheet 2 in our case. Now open the Edit menu and select Delete Sheet. An alert box appears confirming that we really want to delete this sheet. It also warns us that the sheet and its data will be permanently deleted. This is what we have in mind, so we'll click OK. The sheets of this workbook now contain sheet 4, sheet 1, and sheet 3.
You may pause the tape now.
Let's review what we've covered in this chapter. We learned how to select single or multiple cells, and as a little bonus, we also learned how to apply a few formatting changes to these selections.
Finally, we learned how to add or remove single or multiple cells and worksheets. We've learned the basic skills required to navigate through a workbook. In this chapter, we'll learn how to make various edits to a worksheet based on concepts we've already learned.
Naming a sheet is important so that we can easily recognize what information is stored on each sheet. This is especially helpful when we have several sheets in a workbook. To name Sheet 1, let's place the pointer on this tab, then double-click. This selects the title of this sheet so we can enter a new name. Let's type Video Rates and press Return. Sheet 1 is now renamed as Video Rates. For a little more practice, let's rename Sheet 3. We'll select it, then name it Extra 1 because no purpose has been assigned to it as of yet. Finally, let's select Sheet 4 and rename it. We double-click the tab, then type Extra 2 and press Return.
When we look at the worksheets in our workbook, we see Extra 2, Video Rates, and Extra 1. Bruce, does anything about this appear odd to you?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes. The sheets are obviously out of order. We need to rearrange them. Rearranging the order of worksheets is as simple as dragging a sheet to a different position. In this instance, we really need to move Extra 2 to appear as the last sheet. To do this, we place the pointer over Sheet tab Extra 2, then drag after the Extra 1 Sheet tab. Once we release, this sheet appears at the right end. Let's finish entering data for the Video Rates sheet. We'll begin by labeling column A, where we need to show each month. We are currently looking at the Extra 2 worksheet. So let's select Video Rates so we can edit it. We want to use column A for the months of the year. So let's select cell A4, then type January. Then in cell A5 we'll type February and press Return. Now we could continue down column A typing in each month by hand, but there is a faster way to enter these dates called AutoFill. It works like this. With cell A5 selected, we'll place the pointer over the lower right corner of the cell. Notice that the corner outline becomes bolded. This part of the cell is called the Fill handle. By dragging the Fill handle to adjacent cells, we are able to custom fill a series for frequently used text entries. Let's drag down to cell A12. Notice that all the months are filled in for us.
Let's discuss what just happened. It's called AutoFill.
AutoFill, one of the many advantages to using Excel, allows us to type in the name of a month, day of the week, or other typical series and complete the series by simply dragging.
We can fill the series to rows or columns just as long as we're filling in adjacent cells.
For some first-hand experience using AutoFill, we're going to open a sample file that contains information that could be considered a part of a series and see what happens.
But before we can do this, we need to learn how to open an existing workbook.
There are different ways we can open a workbook. One way is to click the Open tool. This tool is located first from the left on the standard toolbar. The other ways are found in the File menu, so let's open this menu by clicking it. The Open command, second down, can be activated by pressing the key combination of Command key plus O while the menus are closed, or with the File menu open, we can simply click on Open. Let's do this. To open a document from the ViaGrafix learning files, we need to go to the location we saved the files to from the ViaGrafix website. We saved ours to the desktop in a folder called Excel 98 Files so we can see the file Hands-on AutoFill. To open it, we select the file, then click Open. The workbook Hands-on AutoFill now appears in our window. The purpose of this file is to see what counts as a custom fill series. We'll test each of these cells by dragging to adjacent cells. So let's begin with cell A4, Monday. We select A4, then place the pointer on the fill handle in the lower right corner. Now let's drag to cell H4. Notice that the other days of the week appear in order. In cell H4, Monday appears. This is because the series will run over and over again depending on how many cells we fill. Now let's try January in cell A9. We select A9, then drag to H9 by the fill handle. Notice the months go to August. In cell A13 we have first. Let's drag A13 by its fill handle to cell H13. Notice this fills the series going from first to eighth. Continuing down the worksheet, we have something a little different in cell A16 and B16. In cell A16 we have the number 1. In cell B16 there's a formula. By looking at the formula bar we see it's A16 plus 1. We'll learn more about formulas later, but for now let's see what this does when we use AutoFill. With B16 selected, we'll drag by the fill handle to cell H16. Notice that we have numbers 1 through 8 now. In cell A18 we see the letter I. This is actually to represent the Roman numeral 1. When we drag this cell by its fill handle, we see that it doesn't complete the series going to Roman numeral 2 and so forth. That's because the letter I isn't considered to be a typical series, so the contents of A18 are copied to each cell we drag over. We'll find a similar outcome in cell A19 where the letter A appears. When we drag A19 by its fill handle, we see that the letter A is copied to each cell we drag over. Excel doesn't create a series of the alphabet. Up to this point, we've used AutoFill to continue a series down a row, but we can just as well fill over adjacent cells in a column. To prove that we can use AutoFill to complete a series in a column, let's select cell F4 where Saturday appears. By dragging the fill handle, we see that we can drag down and extend the series to Sunday and forward. Now let's select cell F4 again. This time we'll drag up. We place the pointer over the fill handle, but instead of dragging down, we'll drag up. Notice that this causes Friday to appear in the above cell. Regardless of the series, we can copy in rows or in columns. Now that we've practiced filling a series to adjacent cells, we can close this document by choosing Close from the File menu. When prompted to save changes, we'll choose Don't Save. The average production rates for video editors now appears in our window again. The next step in filling in this worksheet would be to plug in the monthly rate for each editor. But instead of taking time to type in the rates, we'll close this workbook and open a sample file that has the rates entered. To close this workbook, we'll press the Command key plus the W key since this is a shortcut for close. When prompted to save the sheet, we'll select Don't Save. Now, to open the new workbook, we'll press the Command key plus the O since this is the shortcut for Open. This prompts us to select a document to open. We find the location where we downloaded the learning files. Ours were saved in a folder called Excel 98 Files on the desktop. Once we find Editor Rates Worksheet, we open it by double-clicking. The worksheet now appears in our window with the sheet called Video Rates selected. For our final exercises in this chapter, we'll learn how to adjust column width. Let's adjust the width of column A. The easiest way to adjust column width is from within the worksheet. When we want to adjust the width of a column, we place our pointer between column headers until the pointer changes into a boundary. This looks like a line with a double-headed arrow pointing in the direction of the column or row. Let's place the pointer between column header A and B. With the boundary, we can drag right or left. The actual width is displayed in a tip as we drag. To adjust the column so that it is just wide enough to fit the widest entry in the entire column, let's double-click the boundary between column A and B. Notice that we can see all the items in this column and the widest entry, which is September, fits perfectly. Now let's adjust the width of columns C through F at the same time. We want each of these to be narrowed down to their widest entry in the column. This is achieved by first selecting each column. So let's drag from column heading C to column heading F. Now we can double-click any boundary within the selection. Notice how this adjusts each column to its widest entry. To deselect these cells, let's press the left arrow key.
You may pause the tape now.
Let's review what we covered in this chapter.
We learned how to name sheets and rearrange sheets.
Then we entered a series into cells by using AutoFill. And finally, we learned ways to adjust row or column width or height. Think about all the reports on spreadsheets you've seen. The bottom line is that the majority of uses for spreadsheets are informative, not entertaining, which means they have a tendency to look dry.
Formatting can make all the difference in the world in a worksheet. With a few colors and some emphasis on key points, we can make a worksheet more lively.
The greatest benefit of adding energy to a report is that we are able to draw attention to key points and hopefully retain more interest in the information itself.
The title of a worksheet should rest in cell A1 if we want to center it over the main body of information in our worksheet. Notice that the title for this worksheet resides in B1. We want to center the title over the body of this worksheet, so we'll cut the information in B1 and paste it into A1. So, with cell B1 selected, we'll click on the Cut tool on the toolbar, located 7th from the left on the standard toolbar. Now we'll click in A1 since this is where we'll paste the data. To paste, click the Paste tool located 9th from the left on the standard toolbar. For the majority of worksheets, we'll want to center the title over the body of the worksheet or a specific range of cells. We'd like to center the title over columns A to F. Right now we see that the title is exceeding this range. And in other situations, we would find that the title appears awkward for other reasons, such as alignment. In any case, our first step is to select the range we want the title to cover. In our case, we'll select from cell A1 to F1. Next, we open the Format menu and select Cells. This dialog box is practically a one-stop solution to formatting. By looking at the tabs, we notice we can adjust number, alignment, font, border, patterns, and protection. Centering the title falls into the category of alignment, so we'll select the Alignment tab. Notice we can adjust the horizontal or vertical alignment in the cell, the orientation, or text control. Let's click the horizontal field. We want to center this across the range we've selected, so we'll choose Center Across Selection. Before making any other changes, let's see what this does to the title by clicking OK. Not much has changed except the fact that we can no longer see the beginning of the title. So let's reopen the Formatting Cells dialog box. This time we'll select the Wrap Text option, then press Return. Notice how this takes the extra text and neatly wraps it over the range we selected. Centering text across a selection and wrapping the text are the two most commonly needed formatting changes for a title. To apply font formatting, we'll open the Format menu and once again select Cells. But this time, let's select the Font tab. From here we can adjust the font, font style, font size, add an underline, color, or effects such as strike through, superscript or subscript, outline, or shadow. These features can be applied to a cell the same way they can be applied to a document in Word. All we have to do is select what appeals to us and monitor the changes in the preview box. For example, we'll change the underline by clicking the drop-down for underline and selecting double. Then we'll add a shadow by clicking the shadow effect. To see how this changes the title, let's choose OK. Now let's add some formatting from the Formatting toolbar. If we've used Word, many of these are already familiar. For instance, the first tool from the left allows us to change the type of font used. We click a font to apply it. This is fun to experiment with, but for now we'll leave Geneva selected and click the drop-down arrow to close the font list. The next tool is for font size. Let's decrease the size of the text. By clicking the drop-down arrow for the Size tool, we can select any of the sizes available or even type in a custom size. Let's change the text size to 15 by typing in 15 and pressing Return. The third, fourth, and fifth tools are for adding the bold, italic, or underline attributes. We can see that bold was already selected because the tool for bold with a B is highlighted. Something that may strike us as odd is that the underline tool isn't selected, and we have an underline. The reason it isn't is because we aren't using the standard single underline. We're using a special underline from the Formatting Cells dialog box. If we were using the standard underline, the underline tool would appear selected. Following the attribute tools are the alignment tools. We can align cell items to the left, in the center, or to the right. By default, numbers are aligned to the right and text is aligned to the left. Let's change the alignment of all the numbers in this worksheet to center instead of left. We drag from B4 to F15, then click the Center Align tool. Each number is now aligned to the middle. To deselect these cells, we'll press the left arrow key. Once we apply a format to a cell, such as alignment, that format stays with the cells until we clear the formatting. The next tool on the formatting toolbar is Merge and Center. This allows us to merge cell boundaries. In the worksheet we're using, we might merge cells if two editors combine their efforts in editing for a month so that the same cell and data will appear for both editors. For instance, let's say that Sam and Jason worked together in October, so we want to merge cells E13 and F13. First, select cells E13 and F13. Now click the Merge and Center tool. An alert box appears letting us know that each of these cells contained its own data and that merging will cause the upper left cell to display its data. In our case, E13 will dominate. This is what we want, so press Return. The cells now become one. To format numbers, let's select the sheet called Extra 1. Here we see the quarterly sales for 4 districts. When looking at this, we question if this is really currency because it isn't formatted with dollars. Because these are revenues, let's select from cells B5 to F9, then go to the Formatting toolbar and click the tool with the dollar sign. This tool, the Currency tool, adds dollar signs, commas, and decimals to values so that anyone who views it will know the values are dollars.
You may pause the tape now.
Let's review what we've learned in this chapter. We learned how to center a cell over a selection and apply word wrap.
We applied other formats, including merging and centering a cell and applying a style such as currency. In this chapter, we will introduce using formulas so that you'll be able to perform simple calculations in your workbooks.
We are still looking at the Formatting Numbers worksheet. One of the obvious factors that we're missing are totals. To quickly add totals for a column or a row, we use the Sum function. Excel makes applying this function even easier by placing the AutoSum tool on the standard toolbar. It's located below the window menu and has the summation symbol on it. With cell B9 selected, let's see what happens when we click the AutoSum tool. A dotted line appears around the other numbers in this column, and in cell B9 we see equals sum of B5 through B8. This is exactly what we want, so we'll press Return. The sum of $141,655 appears in our cell. AutoSum worked perfectly with the column of values. Let's see what happens when we have a row of values. We'll select F5, then click the AutoSum tool. Cells B5 through E5 are selected with a dotted line around them, and in F5 we see the function equals sum of B5 to E5. To accept this, we press Return and see the sum of $86,531.42 in cell F5. Let's take a moment to understand how the AutoSum function works. This will help us to understand all functions. At the beginning of any cell entry other than text or a single value, we need an equals sign or a plus sign. As we see here, there's an equals sign before this function. Next, we see the name of the function. In this case, it's sum. After the function, we have a listing of the cells to be included with the function. In this case, we have cell B5, a colon, and B8. Cell B5 represents the first cell in the series to be included in the calculation, B8 indicates the last cell to be included with the calculation, and the colon between them indicates that all cells between B5 and B8 are a part of the calculation. The colon saves the time that it would have taken having to list every single cell to be included.
Now that we've entered formulas for one of the columns and one of the rows, we should probably finish the exercise by using the AutoSum tool for all the remaining columns and rows, right? Well, we could do that, but it isn't our first choice.
When we have an entire row or column of similar functions, we don't need to enter the function for each cell in the row or column. We can just copy the formula.
We want to apply the sum function to cells C9 to E9 and to cells F6 to F8. The easiest way to do this is to copy the formula in cell B9 to the cells in C9 to E9. Then we'll copy the formula from F6 to cell F8. Let's place the pointer on the lower right corner of cell B9 until we see the fill handle. Now we drag the fill handle to cell E9. At first glance, we may think we've done something wrong because each cell is filled with pound signs. The question becomes, how do we fix this? When using AutoSum, it's common to find cells with pound signs. The pound signs mean that there's not enough width in the cell to display the entire number. We can fix each of these cells by selecting columns C to E, then double-clicking one of the cell boundaries to adjust the columns to their widest entry. We now see the sum of each column instead of pound signs. This is a common problem because if we've already adjusted the width of a column for the values and headers, the sum of the values tends to be wider, especially when we have several values, and we need a wider cell again. Now let's use AutoFill to copy the formula from cell F5 down to F8. We place the pointer over the fill handle in F5, then drag to F9. There are two cells here that are not wide enough, so we'll double-click on the cell boundary for column F to widen these. We are still working with the Formatting Numbers worksheet. We want to show how much of a contribution each district made to the total contribution. Our first step is to find the total contribution of all 4 districts in all 4 quarters. The sum for the annual total is in cell F9. To make it stand out, let's select cell F9 and add some formatting. On the Formatting toolbar, located second from the right, is the fill color. We'll click this tool to apply a yellow fill to the cell. Our next step is to enter a formula that will divide the annual total by the total for a district so we can see what percentage each district contributed. We'll select cell G5, then enter an equals sign since all formulas need to begin with equal or plus. Now type F5, since this is where the total for the district in this row appears, divided by F9, since this is where the annual total appears. When we press enter, we find a decimal value of 0.1381.
When we use AutoFill to copy formulas to adjacent cells, Excel automatically adjusts the formula so that it is customized for that row or column. This can pose a problem when we want each formula to consistently use a reference, such as for a percentage of a whole, as in our example.
To overcome this problem, we can add a dollar sign to the cell reference that we want to remain constant. In Excel, the term for this is an absolute cell reference instead of a relative cell reference.
Before making this an absolute cell reference, we'll demonstrate what happens when the reference is relative to make this concept clear. Let's select cell G5's fill handle and drag to G9. Notice that the formula doesn't copy too well. We should have values in each cell, and cell G9 should be 1 to represent dividing into a cell. But when we select one of the cells, such as G6, we see that the formula has changed to divide F6 by F10. Let's fix the formula. We'll select cell G5 so its formula is displayed in the formula bar. We'll go to the formula bar and add a $ before 9 and F9 since we want this cell reference to be constant. When copying to other rows, we'd want to place the $ for the absolute reference before the column header, such as F in this case. Since we use the formula bar to edit this cell, we'll click the green checkmark tool, which is the Enter tool. It works the same as if we'd pressed Enter and enters the adjusted content into the cell. Now let's copy this formula to G9 by dragging the fill handle. Notice that the values appear and G9 is 1. When we select a cell, such as G9, we see the reference to F9 has remained constant. To finish our work in this worksheet, we need to format cells G5 to G9 with a %sign. So let's select these cells, then click the %style tool on the formatting toolbar. It's the one with a % on it. Now we can easily see which district has contributed the most. It's District 2. Printing worksheets can often be a hassle because they can stretch in directions paper was never meant to show. Let's preview this page before printing. We open the File menu and select Print Preview. Notice that we cannot see all the columns. There are a couple things we can do to fix this. We could decrease font sizes, or we can change the orientation of the page so that the worksheet is viewed horizontally. To adjust the orientation of the worksheet, let's select the Setup button. Here we can adjust the page, margins, header or footer, or the sheet. With Page selected, we'll change the orientation to Landscape and press Return. It looks like this caused problems with our values, but when we click to zoom in, we see the numbers are here. So let's print directly from the preview window by clicking the Print tool. This opens a print dialog box where we see one copy will be printed and other print options. These are good, so we'll click Print. The worksheet is now printed.
You may pause the tape now.
Let's review what we've covered in this chapter. We learned how to enter a function such as AutoSum and how the formulas work.
We entered an absolute reference, used Print Preview, changed the orientation of the worksheet, and printed it. We've covered a lot of information in this tutorial. If you feel the need to review, simply rewind the tape and watch that section again until you are comfortable with the material.
Please feel free to contact us about our video tutorials.
Our worldwide website address is www.viagrafix.com. Send your questions or comments on this tutorial via email to admin@viagrafix.com. For sales questions or to place an order, email sales@viagrafix.com.
We at ViaGrafix would like to thank you for choosing our company for your computer training needs.
Remember, if you plan to learn Microsoft Excel for Macintosh or any other computer software, there is no better way than through video training with ViaGrafix.